Have you ever sent someone a message, watched it get delivered, and then heard nothing? At first, you're fine. They're probably busy. But 10 minutes become an hour. An hour becomes an entire evening, and suddenly your brain is building a case against you. Maybe I said too much. Maybe they're upset. Maybe I embarrassed myself. Maybe they've lost interest. Maybe I don't matter to them anymore. Nothing has actually happened. No criticism, no argument, no goodbye. There's only silence. And yet that silence can feel exactly like rejection. Why? Why does an unanswered message, a quiet room, or an emotionally distant partner affect us so deeply? Why do we often interpret missing information in the most painful way possible? The answer has less to do with being too sensitive and more to do with how the human mind handles uncertainty, attachment, and social threat. Today, we're going to explore why silence feels like rejection and how to stop letting an empty space automatically become evidence that you're unwanted. We tend to think of silence as the absence of communication, but psychologically, silence is still information. If someone normally responds quickly and suddenly stops, you notice the change. If a friend becomes quiet after you share something vulnerable, your brain starts searching for meaning. If your partner withdraws during conflict, the lack of response can feel louder than anything they could have said. The problem is that silence rarely explains itself. A direct statement gives your mind something concrete to process. I am tired. I need some time. I don't know what to say. I'm upset, but I want to talk later. Those sentences may be uncomfortable, but they create boundaries around the uncertainty. Silence doesn't. It leaves an open space, and the brain dislikes open spaces, especially in relationships. So it tries to close the gap by creating an explanation. Unfortunately, when we feel emotionally vulnerable, the explanation we create is often not neutral. We don't think, they may be taking a nap. We think, I did something wrong. This is partly because uncertainty can feel more threatening than bad news. Bad news hurts, but at least it gives us a reality we can respond to. Uncertainty keeps us suspended between hope and fear. And the brain often prepares for the worst, because from a survival perspective, underestimating a social threat once could be more costly than overestimating it several times. So silence becomes a blank screen onto which we project our deepest fears. Human beings are social creatures, but that phrase doesn't fully capture how dependent we have historically been on belonging. For most of human history, acceptance by a group wasn't merely pleasant. It was protective. Other people helped provide food, shelter, safety, care, and access to resources. Being excluded could be dangerous. That history still influences the modern nervous system. We may live in apartments, work remotely, and communicate through glowing screens, but the brain remains highly sensitive to signs of social disconnection. A delayed reply is not the same thing as exile from a community. Intellectually, we know this. But emotionally, the nervous system may react before logic has time to intervene. The threat system asks a rapid question. Am I being pushed away? If the answer seems like it might be yes, the body responds. Your stomach tightens, your attention narrows. You check your phone repeatedly. You reread the conversation. You search for the exact moment when everything supposedly went wrong. This is one reason telling yourself to just stop overthinking rarely works. The reaction isn't purely intellectual. Your body may already be preparing for loss. And once the nervous system enters that state, ambiguous information becomes easier to interpret negatively. A short reply feels cold. A neutral facial expression seems angry. A quiet moment appears judgmental. You aren't simply observing silence anymore. You're observing it through a nervous system, expecting rejection. Silence doesn't feel the same to everyone. One person may experience a delayed response and move on with their day. Another may become intensely anxious within minutes. The difference is often found in what silence has meant before. Imagine a child whose caregiver regularly becomes quiet when angry. Instead of explaining the conflict, the caregiver withdraws affection, refuses to respond, or makes the child guess what went wrong. That child may learn, silence means love is being removed. Or imagine growing up around emotionally unavailable adults. You express fear, sadness, or excitement, but no one responds with curiosity or comfort. You may learn, my feelings make people disappear. Perhaps you were excluded by friends without explanation. Perhaps a former partner suddenly stopped communicating. Perhaps people only paid attention when you performed well, behaved perfectly, or made yourself useful. Over time, the brain builds associations. Silence means danger. Distance means abandonment. Uncertainty means I'm about to be left. These associations can survive long after the original situation ends. So, when someone doesn't text back today, you may not be reacting only to today. Your nervous system may also be reacting to every earlier moment in which silence came before punishment, withdrawal, or loss. That doesn't mean your feelings are irrational. It means they have a history. Understanding that history can help you separate the present moment from the older wound that activates. Let's say you send a vulnerable message. I really enjoyed spending time with you. I'd like to see you again. 3 hours pass without a response. Here are the facts. You sent a message. 3 hours have passed. You have not received a reply. That's all you actually know. But the mind rarely stops there. The story might be, they regret spending time with me. Or, I was too eager. I ruined it. Or, they've met someone better. The emotional pain comes not only from the silence, but from the story attached to it. This is important because facts and interpretations can feel identical inside the mind. They haven't responded is a fact. They're deliberately ignoring me because I'm unlovable is an interpretation. The second statement may arrive with such emotional certainty that it doesn't feel like a theory. It feels like direct perception. But certainty is not proof. Sometimes people are busy. Sometimes they feel overwhelmed. Sometimes they need time to understand their own feelings. Sometimes they intend to answer and become distracted. And yes, sometimes silence does indicate avoidance or disinterest. The goal is not to pretend every silence is harmless. The goal is to stop treating the most painful explanation as the only possible explanation before enough evidence exists. Our attachment patterns can influence how we respond to relational uncertainty. Someone with a more secure attachment style may notice silence, feel concerned, and still maintain a stable sense of self. They haven't replied. I hope everything is okay. I'll get it some time. Someone with an anxious attachment pattern may experience the same silence as an urgent threat. They're pulling away. I need to fix this immediately. That urgency can lead to repeated messages, excessive apologizing, seeking reassurance, or trying to regain control. The painful irony is that these behaviors can create more distance, which then appears to confirm the original fear. On the other side, someone with avoidant tendencies may use silence to regulate emotional intensity. When a conversation feels uncomfortable, they withdraw. Not always because they no longer care, but because distance is how they manage vulnerability. This can create a difficult cycle. One person becomes anxious and reaches closer. The other becomes overwhelmed and moves further away. The increased distance intensifies the first person's anxiety. Their increased pursuit intensifies the second person's withdrawal. Neither person necessarily intends to reject the other, yet the cycle produces the emotional experience of rejection. Recognizing the pattern doesn't excuse harmful behavior. Chronic stonewalling, manipulative silent treatment, and disappearing without explanation can cause real damage. But not every pause is punishment, and not every withdrawal is abandonment. Sometimes silence is simply a difference in how people cope. It's useful to distinguish healthy space from weaponized silence. A healthy pause has communication around it. Someone might say, I'm too overwhelmed to discuss this properly right now. Can we return to it tonight? They are taking space, but they are also protecting the connection. You know what is happening, and there is a reasonable expectation that communication will resume. The silent treatment is different. It uses withdrawal to punish, control, provoke, or force the other person to chase reassurance. There may be no explanation, no time frame, and no willingness to repair. A healthy space says, I need to regulate myself so we can communicate. Punitive silence says, you will feel my absence until you give me what I want. One creates temporary distance in service of the relationship. The other turns distance into a weapon. If someone repeatedly uses silence to destabilize you, the solution is not simply to become less sensitive. The relationship itself may need clearer boundaries. When someone is quiet, why do we so quickly assume it says something about us? Because self-blame can create an illusion of control. If the problem is that you said the wrong thing, perhaps you can find the perfect thing to say next. If the problem is that you weren't attractive, intelligent, entertaining, or emotionally restrained enough, perhaps you can change yourself. Our self-blame hurts, but it gives the mind a task. Uncertainty gives it nothing. It may be more frightening to admit, I don't know what they're thinking, and I cannot control their response, but that is often the more honest answer. Another person's silence can reflect their stress, habits, emotional capacity, fear, priorities, or communication skills. It may contain information about the relationship, but it is not automatically a verdict on your value. Someone can fail to recognize your worth without reducing it. Someone can be unable to meet your needs without making those needs unreasonable. Someone can reject a connection without rejecting your humanity. Rejection is an event. The mind often turns it into an identity. Those are not the same thing. So what can you do when silence activates that old fear? First, name what is happening. Instead of saying, they're rejecting me, try saying, I'm experiencing uncertainty, and my brain is interpreting it as rejection. That sentence creates a small but meaningful distance between the event and the conclusion. Second, separate facts from stories. Write down what you know. They haven't answered since yesterday. Then write down what you're assuming. They're tired of me. They're angry. I've ruined everything. Seeing the difference on paper can interrupt the feeling that every thought is a fact. Third, generate alternative explanations, not to force optimism, but to restore balance. Perhaps they're busy. Perhaps they're avoiding a difficult conversation. Perhaps they don't know what they want. Perhaps they're losing interest. Perhaps the silence has nothing to do with you. Several explanations can remain possible at the same time. Fourth, regulate your body before taking action. Step away from the phone. Take a walk. Slow your breathing. Shower. Stretch. Speak to someone you trust. Do something that reminds your nervous system that you are safe, even while the answer is unknown. This matters because messages sent from panic often seek immediate emotional relief rather than genuine communication. And fifth, decide what clear communication looks like. You might say, hey, I noticed we haven't spoken since our conversation. I'm not sure how to interpret the silence, so I wanted to check in. Or, I respect your need for space, but prolonged silence is difficult for me. Could you let me know when you'll be ready to talk? This is direct without being accusatory. It makes your need visible while leaving the other person responsible for their response. There is also a difficult truth we need to acknowledge. Sometimes silence does become an answer. Not necessarily an answer about your worth, but an answer about someone's availability, interest, maturity, or ability to communicate. If you have reached out clearly, allowed reasonable time, and received a consistent pattern of avoidance, you may need to stop searching for a hidden explanation. I said this does not mean you must leave at the first delayed message or demand constant access to another person. People have lives, limits, and different communication rhythms. But connection requires some form of mutual participation. You deserve relationships in which confusion is not the primary form of intimacy. You deserve people who can say, "I need space," rather than making you decode their disappearance. And if someone cannot offer clarity, you can create your own. You can decide, "I will not repeatedly chase someone who will not communicate with me." That is not punishment. It is a boundary. The deepest work is not learning how to guarantee that nobody will reject you. That guarantee doesn't exist. The deeper work is learning that uncertainty will not destroy you. You can send an honest message and survive not knowing the response. You can give someone space without immediately erasing yourself. You can feel the fear of rejection without obeying every impulse it creates. You can allow another person to reveal who they are instead of exhausting yourself trying to control how they see you. Silence becomes less powerful when you stop treating it as a courtroom where your worth is on trial. Maybe they will respond. Maybe they won't. Maybe the relationship will deepen. Maybe it will end. But your value does not rise and fall with somebody else's availability. The silence may tell you something about them. It may tell you something about the relationship. It may even awaken something that still needs healing within you, but it does not get to define you. So the next time silence feels like rejection, pause before you fill it with the worst possible story. Return to what you actually know. Listen to what the fear is trying to protect. Communicate clearly when communication is possible. Set boundaries when silence becomes a pattern. And remind yourself, an unanswered message is not proof that you are unworthy. An emotionally unavailable person is not evidence that you are too much. And another person's absence does not require you to abandon yourself. Sometimes silence is rejection. Sometimes it is fear, distraction, overwhelm, or uncertainty. But no matter what it means, you do not have to turn it into a judgment about who you are. Because silence is an empty space, and you get to decide whether you fill that space with self-rejection or with self-trust.